Welcome, stranger. Today we travel to a time that many romanticize, but hardly anyone truly understands. No glamour, no fairy tales, just harsh reality, dark alleys, and the constant struggle for survival. If you love history as much as I do, then sit back, switch off from everyday life, and join me on this journey. And if you have anything on your heart, please let me know in the comments, like, how was your day? Were there any difficulties for you? Was there anything nice for you? So I hope I can offer you a good and restful sleep. Make yourself comfortable, relax your mind and breathe in and out slowly. And now, welcome to another world. Congratulations, you just woke up in a medieval dungeon. You're not on a straw mattress, not in a house. Instead, you're in a space that is the opposite of what you consider human. Your bed is the cold, bare stone floor. Perhaps it's covered with a layer of old straw that hasn't been changed in months or years, and it is now a dirty, sticky mass of excrement, urine, mould, and the blood of previous occupants. There is no soft mattress, no pillows, and certainly no fine sheets. Just a few worn scraps. They might once have been blankets, but they are now heavy with dirt and moisture, and they feel rough and heavy. You blink awake, but there is no light to blink, just complete darkness. It's like a medieval alarm clock, only loud, and somehow even more difficult, especially when you hear the sounds of your own state and the distant sounds of other prisoners. Your home is a stone cage, often underground. It has a single, heavy iron door. That lets in no daylight, and it only announces the distant sound of keys and the creak of old hinges. There are no windows, no sign of an open plan, sharing space with family, livestock and insects. Just you, your thoughts, and a number of parasites. They are now your companions. The smell. It's a mix of unpleasant odours, a mix of stale urine, human sweat, feces, vomit, mould, and the smell of decay. That goes deep into your lungs and stays there. Not only are scented candles not invented, but you wouldn't have enough air to breathe well, let alone have a flame. You try to stretch, but immediately regret it. This is because the air is cold, and your joints hurt with every movement. You may be 18 years old, which in medieval terms, considering the average life expectancy, which is shorter in a dungeon, is probably close to middle age. Your spine makes noise like an old object, and your knees sound like a sack of bones being moved. Getting up from sleep involves risk. The floor is either damp from last night's moisture, coming through the cracks in the walls, or is crusted with something left behind by a previous occupant. Either way, your bare feet are now part of the dungeon floor. Oh, and privacy. What is that? If you're lucky, you'll be alone in this space. But if you're unlucky, you'll be sharing the room with other people, who are just as unwell, desperate, and perhaps close to losing their mind as you are. There's no bedroom, no curtains, no time for you alone. Just shared difficult conditions with worms, rats, and other human beings. Welcome to the morning in a medieval dungeon. Here you are never truly alone. Parasites, rodents, and the presence of difficult situations are always with you. And that's just the beginning of your day. Things often get worse from here. You managed to move out of your sleeping spot, congratulations. Now nature is calling, and she doesn't call quietly, she demands. This is where the part begins, where you really miss the modern bathroom. There is no toilet, no place to sit, no toilet paper, no flush, not even a tool in the corner. In the 14th century, relieving yourself in the dungeon is a difficult event. It is often a public event if you are unlucky enough to be locked up with others. Your bathroom is probably a corner of your cell, or if you're quite lucky, a bucket. That's already full, because your cellmate had a difficult night after eating poor food or tainted water. The smell is very strong. You hold your breath, do your business, and then comes the situation. There's no way to get rid of it. It stays there. It builds up. The streets of medieval cities may have been open sewers, but in the dungeon, you're in a sewer-like condition, a pool of human waste, vomit, and unclear liquids that you'd rather not examine. If you're lucky enough to be in a dungeon with a latrine, it's a hole in the wall that drains your waste directly into a pit, one that is rarely emptied. Here you may sit next to strangers, where privacy is not present and ventilation is minimal. You can make small talk, but try not to breathe too deeply. Toilet paper? Not known. Most people wipe themselves with straw, leaves, rags, moss. Or, if they're feeling generous, a piece of wool. Sometimes nothing at all, which might explain why shaking hands wasn't very popular yet. And if you're in a better dungeon, maybe even a castle dungeon, it's certainly better, right? Well, partly. You may have a privy chamber. This is a hole in the wall that drains your waste directly into the moat. An idea, except your enemies know this. And yes, people sometimes climb through the drain. A different kind of entry. So whether you're a peasant or a baron, using the medieval dungeon toilet is a difficult process. It's cold, it's public, it can be risky, and it's not pleasant. One misstep on a wet stone path and you could end up face first in what's left of humanity, and you haven't brushed your teeth yet. But we'll get to that next. You survived the toilet. You might want a reward, right? Maybe a nice breakfast. Something warm, good, comforting. Excuse me. This is a medieval dungeon. Nothing is comforting here. Breakfast, if you can even call it that, is a poor meal. There are no fancy egg dishes, no coffee machines working, and certainly no modern toast. You sit or squat on the cold, damp floor, in front of a wooden bowl, containing something that looks like it was scraped off the ground. Welcome to your daily ration of pottage, if you're lucky. Pottage is a thick stew, made from whatever you can find, if you can get it at all. Grains, root vegetables, maybe a few beans if you're very lucky. But in the dungeon, pottage is rare. Instead, you can usually expect a small, hard piece of old bread and stale, cloudy water. There is no cooking, no preparation. The food is simply thrown to you or pushed onto the floor. The piece is hard. It could be used for other things. It is made from coarse rye or barley flour, often mixed with sawdust, ground acorns, or other things, because wheat is for rich people. This bread is not easy to eat. You don't cut it, you deal with it. And drinks, you don't drink juice or a milk drink. You drink water. Yes, water. At 6 a.m, noon, evening. But not just any water. The water in the dungeon has parasites and dirt. It's old, warm, and smells bad. You drink it anyway, because you are thirsty. The water you're given is a liquid that probably won't kill you immediately, but will lead to health problems later. Children also drink it if they are in a dungeon. Nobody's happy about it, but at least it doesn't kill you right away. Do you want meat or cheese? Keep dreaming. This is rare even for the richest, and only if your master is generous. Most prisoners don't eat meat, except perhaps when they can eat a dead animal in the dungeon. As for fresh fruit, only if it is in season and has not already become alcohol. And don't even think about spices, unless you're royalty, and even then, you have little power in the dungeon. A pinch of pepper costs a lot more than a working person's monthly pay. Salt is valuable enough to be stored carefully. So you chew your rough bread, swallow your medieval water, and try not to think about the rat that may have been on your food during the night. Breakfast in the dungeon doesn't give you much energy. It just happens. And now that you're not well fed, it's time to suffer, because your life depends on it, which it does. So, you've had your poor medieval dungeon breakfast, and now it's time to get dressed. Not that it would help. Your wardrobe consists of exactly one outfit. One, it is a coarse wool or linen cloth that you've worn every day for months, possibly years. There is no such thing as changing fashion. The only option is to wear this thing until it falls apart or gives you a skin problem. Underwear is optional, mostly not present. If you're lucky, maybe a pair of linen underpants, but if not, you're naked, under layers of rough, sweaty wool, all lovingly sewn together by someone who probably had little idea what sewing should look like. There is also no washing machine, no soap, and absolutely no cleaning available. So your clothes are stained, stiff, and smell very bad, multiplied by the smell of human waste and decay. Even if you wanted to wash them, it wouldn't be easy. You would have to get water from a river or, well, heat it over a fire, scrub your tunic on a board with ash or lye, and hang it in the sun, which shines rarely, and never in the dungeon. And don't just start with shoes. If you own them, they're made of raw leather, poorly stitched together, and offer little support like a thin skin. Most prisoners simply walk barefoot, through the dirt, through the waste, through rough ground, like sharp stones and areas of illness. All of this means one thing. Your skin is in poor condition. You itch constantly. Small insects live on your body freely. Everyone has them. Even if you were a noble, in the dungeon, you would have many insects. Nobody escapes this. You'll scratch your arm, with a piece of wood under your arm while you talk to your cellmate, and no one will seem surprised. Your skin is sore from rubbing. Your scalp has many bites, and if you develop a rash, well, that's difficult. There's no skin doctor, no cream, no one to tell you what it is. You just keep suffering. And if you're lucky enough not to get a severe problem, great. This rash will simply stay with you for the next 6 months like an unwanted companion. Now that you're clothed in discomfort and covered in difficulty, it's time to go outside and work hard, or more likely face other problems. Now that you're fully dressed in itch and damp wool, it's time to show your morning smile, except you don't. Because in the Middle Ages, smiling involves risk, not emotionally, but with your teeth. There is no toothbrush, no toothpaste, no mouthwash, no floss. The idea of cleaning your mouth is about as popular as bathing, which is to say, not very much. Some people may chew on a twig or rinse with wine or vinegar, but for the most part, your teeth are on their own and are not in good condition. By the time you're in your mid-20s, your smile looks difficult. Tooth decay is present. The gums are swollen, and it's not just food stains on your teeth. This is decay. You have noticeable decay in your mouth. Sugar, although not common, is becoming more present among the rich. Bought at high cost, mostly used in small cakes, or to show wealth. If you are a noble, congratulations. Your teeth may decay faster than farmers. If you're poor, you do it slowly over time, with fermented bread, rough porridge, and years of hard chewing. Toothache, get used to it. They are often present, like medieval weather, the kind of pain that makes you react strongly, or pull the tooth out yourself, with pliers. And that's true. That was the actual treatment. Dentists didn't really exist, but barber surgeons did. Yes, the same person who cuts your hair also pulls your teeth, by candlelight, with an iron hook, and without pain relief. infected tooth? You may get a fever, because without help it can easily lead to a serious issue and cause you to die from a tooth problem. That's right. The same thing that sends us to a shop today could be your end in the 14th century, and there is no help with how you appear to others either. Kiss? Good luck. Bad breath is common. When you're single, you won't be judged by your smile. You will be judged by your land and your livestock. In short, your mouth is in a difficult state, and it is getting worse. Now, as your teeth hurt, comes the situation. The dungeon. The air in the dungeon is not only cold and damp, but it is also very difficult to breathe. Every breath is hard. A mixture of the smell of human waste, mould, decay, the smell of quicklime, sometimes used for cleaning, and the smell of blood that's on the cold stone. It is air that is thick and heavy, so much so that it feels like it is affecting your lungs with every inhale. You cough, your throat is dry, and every breath only brings more of the bad smells into you. This is the air in which you must live, sleep, and die slowly. There is no fresh air movement, no fresh breeze to remove the smell. The thick stone walls and the deep underground location of the dungeon ensure that not a single breath of fresh air enters. You breathe the air of your cellmates, the smells of their illness and state, and your own. It is a cycle of difficult conditions, and this smell not only contributes to your physical discomfort, but it also contributes to your mental state. It is a constant reminder of your situation, of the absence of cleanliness and respect. It gets into your clothes, into your hair, under your fingernails. It becomes part of you. You can try to ignore it, but it is always there, a presence, reminding you where you are, and that you have no way to leave. Your eyes water, your nose feels it, and even if you tried to breathe in the air through your mouth, it wouldn't be any relief. You would just get the bad taste in your mouth. This smell is difficult in itself, a constant effect on your senses. That slowly makes things harder for your mind. Breathing in this environment is an act of survival, and every breath is a success of the body over the difficult conditions around you. After your teeth are hurting and your lungs are uncomfortable, it's time to begin the main task, enduring the dungeon. Except there is no office, no desk, no break, and no chance of moving up. Your task is simple: survive while suffering for no one's comfort, but no one's entertainment. You are a prisoner. Congratulations. This means your life belongs to a master who probably doesn't remember your name. You rise not with the sun, but in darkness, and your work only ends when you collapse or die. Your tools are your own body and the state of your mind. There is no weekend. There is no stopping work. There is only darkness to darkness 7 days a week. One day is free, the day you die, but only if you're not being harmed, dying of an infection, or hoping that your sore toe doesn't become gangrenous. The work is hard. It is not field work, but enduring pain, hunger, and cold. You suffer quietly, dealing with illness and holding on to a small amount of hope until your spine is bent. Nobody cares if you're tired. Nobody asks how your mental state is. If you're a woman, consider the situation. You don't just suffer physically. You also endure the constant fear of harm, perhaps caring for children locked up with you and trying not to spread problems from your cellmate to your side of the straw. Children, they begin to help from the age of 5. No school, no toys, just a small tool and a hope of not dying of illness one day. And if you're one of the few who isn't a farmer, maybe a blacksmith, a tanner, or a cooper, well, you're still in this place, and will probably never do your job again. The payment is just staying alive. The benefits: occasional bleeding, a broken bone, difficult situation, got a fever. Drink some lukewarm water and carry on. You can't afford to stop even for a day. Because if you don't suffer, you will be harmed. And if you don't get harmed, well, medieval Europe had a way to deal with that. It means you will be replaced. So you hold on to your life, ignore the blisters and the pain, and keep going. Because in the Middle Ages, your existence in the dungeon is not a job. It's a long test of survival. Now that your backs are hurting from suffering in the dungeon, let's talk about the weather. Because in the Middle Ages, the temperature in the dungeon was less a question of the seasons and more a question of constant difficulty from the environment. Let's start with winter. There is no insulation, no central heating, and no ceiling. Just thick stone walls with cracks that you could put something through. Your windows are blocked openings that only let in nothingness and the sound of your state. The fire in the stove, a good idea, but you don't have enough wood to keep it burning, because wood is costly and gathering it in the forest is sometimes against the rules. Yes, you could face consequences for picking up the wrong branch from the wrong forest. But now you're in the dungeon anyway. You wrap yourself in your single, damp wool tunic, stay close to the dying warmth of your own body, and still wake up with your nose cold. Your feet are constantly cold and often damp. Your fingers are stiff, that they feel like frozen pieces. Frostbite is not diagnosed. It is simply called bad luck. Well, let's move to summer. Sounds better, right? Incorrect. In the summer, your cell becomes very hot, a damp, difficult place. There is no fan, no airflow, and absolutely no way to prevent body odor. You sweat through your layers of clothing, but you can't take them off, because showing too much skin is seen as wrong, and it also brings sunburn, if there were light, insect bites, and social judgment, if there were people. The flies are present in large numbers, attracted by your unwashed body and the smell of the last spoiled bread that's still in the corner. Mosquitoes make noise in your ear while you sleep, provided you can sleep through the sounds of your neighbours and the crying of the babies. The sun is hot in the fields. Here, the damp heat of decay is around you. No sun protection, no hat, unless you made one out of straw, like a figure. And worst of all, you still have to suffer. Heat stroke is simply referred to as a bad turn. So you're either cold, wondering if your toes will last until spring, or sweating through your only pair of socks, while your thighs are rubbed sore, very badly. And the one thing that never changes, no matter what time of year, your clothes still cause discomfort, your food is still poor, if you get any at all, and your next problem is still waiting. Welcome to temperature control, medieval dungeon style. There is none. Thirsty? Do you want to refresh yourself? Do you want to splash some water on your face to wake up from this difficult state of life? Unlucky. In medieval dungeons, water is not safe. It's trying to cause you problems quietly. Let's start with drinking. The nearby stream may look fresh, moving, and clear, like something from a story, but it isn't. Above, someone has just put waste into it, and if not that, then there's probably a dead animal rotting in there. Parasites, bacteria, and many small living things await you in every sip. That's why people drank beer. Yes, beer, even children. But before you imagine medieval children drinking strong beer, understand that was small beer, low in alcohol, helpful for survival. Boiling the water for brewing made it safer than anything that flowed through the city moat. Wine was another option, if you were rich enough to afford it, and weren't worried about being clear-headed before noon. But in the dungeon, you don't have these options. Your water comes from the worst, least clean hole nearby, often a puddle that's used by rats and vermin. It is still lukewarm, and you can see things floating in it. It tastes of earth, mould, and decay. You drink it anyway, because thirst is a strong problem, greater than the fear of illness. Every sip involves risk, a bet with life. As for bathing, certainly water was used for cleaning. In theory, yes, but in practice, absolutely not. Back then, people believed that bathing opened the pores and allowed illnesses to enter. That's right. Washing yourself was considered risky for health. Apparently you were cleaner if you never removed the layer of dirt that stuck to your skin. Communal bathhouses existed, but they quickly gained a reputation as places for talk, issues, and sometimes other activities. The church, of course, became involved and closed many of them. But in the dungeon, these worries are not important. Even if you wanted to bathe, it would be a large effort. You would have to get water from a well, heat it over a fire, fill a container, and then hope that no one in the house used it before you, or worse, after. In the dungeon, there are no containers, no fire, no clean water. Your only option is to catch the rain as it drips through a leak in the ceiling, or to wash your hands in the puddle of dirt on the floor. Rainwater is collected in open containers where birds defecate, insects live, and moss grows. Sounds pleasant, doesn't it? So whether it goes into your mouth, onto your body, or into your fields, water in the Middle Ages was less a source of life and more of a game of chance. One wrong sip, and you'll spend your final days sweating on a bed of straw, holding your stomach, and thinking about your life choices. This is especially true for the dungeon. The lack of cleanliness, the tainted water, the crowded conditions, they create a place for illnesses. You cannot escape. You cannot clean yourself. The dirt gets under your fingernails, into every part of skin, into every open wound. It becomes like a second skin. This constant state of uncleanness is not only physically difficult, but it is also mentally challenging. It takes away your sense of worth, turns you into a state like an animal. The memory of clean skin, of fresh water, of a simple sip without fear of illness becomes a distant, difficult memory. It is a constant struggle against decay, a struggle you cannot win. Every scratch, every tiny wound is a potential cause of a problem. The dirt that accumulates has bacteria just waiting to enter your body. Your clothes, which you cannot change or wash, become a home for insects that feed on your blood and spread illness. And even if you try to cleanse yourself with the little dirty water available to you, you're probably just making it worse. The smell of your body becomes difficult to bear, not only for others, but also for yourself. It is a smell of difficult conditions, decay, and lack of hope. Next time you drink tap water, think of our ancestors. They didn't have the simple act of drinking without risk, and especially not in the dungeon. You drank the water. Or maybe not. Maybe you just stubbed your toe on a rock that caused a problem. Either way, you're sick, you need help, you need a doctor. Difficult situation, you live in the Middle Ages where medicine is really just difficult treatment with a study in religion. Let's start with the diagnosis. Everything that ails you, whether it's a cough, a rash, a broken bone, or a widespread illness, is caused by an imbalance in your humours. The 4 humours were blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to medieval understanding, your health depends on keeping it balanced, like a kind of internal mix. Do you have a fever? Too much blood? The answer? Removing blood. That's right. Let's remove some of your blood into a bowl with a tool or a leech. And yes, often it was barber surgeons who did this. Imagine getting a haircut and some blood removed in one visit. 2 for the price of 1. Do you feel sad or worried? This is clearly too much black bile. The treatment? A laxative. Maybe a warm herbal rinse, or just prayers and a cold cloth, while everyone avoids looking and begins preparing for your end. If you break a bone or get a wound, you're really in trouble. There is no pain relief unless you count becoming unconscious from the pain. Work is performed with knives that have not been cleaned for a long time. Tools are heated over fire, not for cleanliness, but because they simply look more serious. Modern medicine is centuries away. The idea of germs is not yet known. They believe that illnesses come from bad air or from God being unhappy with you. Do you have a stomach ache? It must have been your thoughts. You might need to confess while vomiting. If your condition worsens, you'll be treated with more leeches, possibly some crushed insects, and a religious person to perform the final rites, just in case. At this point they prepare for the healing, known as death. And when you get well, everyone just assumes that God helped you. The person who treated you takes full credit, and the leech is seen as successful. So yes, in the Middle Ages, medicine is less about getting better and more about surviving the treatment. All of this applies to the free world. But in the dungeon, the scenario is even more difficult. You don't have a doctor or a barber surgeon. You're completely in the hands of fate, chance, and your own body. A broken bone, it will not heal correctly, or it will cause death due to infection. A wound, it will fester, and the fever will slowly take over. The diseases that are present in the dungeon, dysentery, typhus, smallpox, the plague, cannot be cured. They are a path to death. If you get sick, there is no one to help you. Your cellmates are either too weak to move you, or too focused on themselves to care for you. The guards only care that you're alive to be harmed, or that you die quickly, so as not to cause them problems. You are alone with your pain, with your illness. The symptoms become worse, the body weakens, and death slowly comes closer. There is no relief, no hope. The air is filled with the sounds of the sick, the sounds of the dying, and the smell of illness and decay. Every day in the dungeon is a time with the possibility of death, and if you get sick, it's only a matter of time before the end comes. The chances of dying from a simple cold, an infection, or a stomach problem are much higher than outside the dungeon walls, because in prison every illness is potentially fatal, and there is no help, no treatment, no hope. You're subject to the germs that live in this wet, dark place, and your body is simply not made to handle these conditions. After a long day of difficult conditions, insects and talk, if you've spoken to a cellmate, it's finally time to eat. You move yourself to your seat, stomach feeling empty, ready for the only break left in a prisoner's life. A meal. Bad news. Your meal may not be good for you. Let's start with the basics. Food preservation doesn't really exist in the dungeon. There is no fridge, no freezer, just the damp, stale basement climate, and the hope that the cold of the stone will keep things safe, which it doesn't. Your meat, if you're lucky enough to get any at all, has been here for days or weeks, covered in flies, in a liquid that is not good, and possibly shared with small animals. Bread is a main part of the medieval diet, but even that is not certain. In bad harvest years, farmers who need food mix it with bark, sawdust, or even clay to make it last longer. And when it's rye season, there's a risk. Ergot. a fungus that can cause shaking, strange thoughts, and sometimes death. It's like eating bread that can cause illness. In the dungeon, however, the bread is usually just a tiny, hard piece that is often old by the time it reaches you. Vegetables are only available when they are in season, and then only the least expensive and strongest ones. Beets. So many beets. Boiled, mashed, or floating in pottage. But in the dungeon, you don't see any fresh vegetables. The only green you see is the mould on the walls. Fruit may be available in the fall, but it goes bad quickly, and sugar is rare, costly, and kept by the rich. Dairy is another risk. Fresh milk spoils in hours. Butter and cheese keep better, but they can have bacteria. People eat them anyway because frankly it's either that or try to eat parts of your clothes, if you had anything suitable. And let's talk about spices. Spices like pepper, cinnamon and nutmeg were worth a lot. For the average farmer, the taste comes from onions, salt, if you're lucky, and lack of variety. Most meals taste plain and not good. But food isn't just a health risk, it is also a social issue. Wild animals belong to the Lord, not to you. If you are caught taking a rabbit, you could be punished, put in prison, or even face death. That's right. Trying to get food could lead to serious consequences, and in the dungeon, you are already punished. The food you receive is minimal, often spoiled, and just enough to keep you alive, so you can continue to exist. It is a form of hardship through not enough food, a slow hunger that weakens your body and lessens your spirit. Every small amount is a test of your ability to cope, your ability to deal with very little. You know it's not enough to feed you well, but you eat it anyway, because you're hungry. The lack of nutrients leads to various health problems. Scurvy, rickets, night blindness. Your teeth may become loose, your bones will become weak, your muscles will decrease. You become less strong, marked by hunger and illness. So as you sit down to your grey stew, or tiny old piece in the dim light or total darkness, remember that every bite involves a risk, but you still eat. Because in the Middle Ages, food provides some energy, but it also presents difficulties. It's evening now. You worked, in the sense of existing under difficult conditions, suffered, and barely processed your meal or peace. You may think the day is coming to an end, but don't relax because others are watching, and also the priest, and also your neighbour Agnes, who will report you if you miss a religious service. But in the dungeon, these worries are not important. In medieval Europe, religion is a very central part of life. The church affects your schedule, your rules, your learning, if you can read, your birth, marriage, death, and everything in between. Think of this as your spiritual guide. And you may not always follow the rules. Each day is structured around prayer times. The church bells ring morning, noon, and evening. Not because people need reminders, but because missing prayer is seen as a serious matter. Forgot to kneel? Seen as a serious matter. Eating meat on Fridays? Seen as a serious matter. Thinking about your neighbour's wife in a dream? Considered a larger serious matter. And yes, a place called hell is described as very real. Priests describe it in detail. Places of fire, places of hot liquid, figures with tools and constant sounds of distress. If difficulties in life don't concern you, the idea of eternal bad conditions might. You can't read the holy book yourself because it's written in Latin, a language for religious people and some educated people. You rely on the church to explain everything for you. That means when the priest says your poor harvest is because you didn't pray enough, well, it's seen that you should try harder. Giving 1/10 of what you own is required. If you grow wheat, you give wheat. If you have chickens, give eggs. If you don't have anything, consider your situation. You're seen as spiritually empty and without financial hope. Holy days are special days, many of them. And while they provide breaks from work, they're not for simple enjoyment. Therefore, attend service, eat simply, confess faults, and remember that simple enjoyment is seen as a risky thing. Questioning the church is risky. People who speak against teachings may face severe consequences such as burning or other punishments. So you go through the actions, you sing, you bow. You pray that your soul will finally end up in a better place after this life, assuming the priest sees you favourably. Because in the Middle Ages a higher power may be merciful, but the church perhaps less so. And in prison, religion, or rather the hope of religious comfort, is often the only support left. The physical world is a difficult place, but the spiritual world offers an escape, although an imagined one. You have no priests, no forgiveness papers, no special ceremonies. All you have are your thoughts and your prayers. The idea of hell, as it has been described to you, is a constant concern. You wonder what issues you may have caused that landed you in this place, and how you can make things right to avoid an even worse eternal punishment. Some prisoners find some peace in prayer, in the prayer that structures the hours and days when there are no sunrises or sunsets to count. Others become sad, lose faith, and fall into a state of mental and spiritual emptiness. The church, so powerful outside, is but a distant memory within the prison walls, an institution that seems to have not helped you. Yet, paradoxically, the idea of God and hell is often the last thing one holds on to. The fear of eternal bad conditions can be greater than the fear of physical death, at least for those who believe strongly. You try to remember prayers you learned as a child, saying them softly to yourself in the dark, hoping they'll give you some small bit of comfort, or save you from the difficult mental state that's about to come. It is a deeply personal journey of faith, for no one can help you and no one can hear you, except perhaps a higher power itself. Religion becomes a source of strength for the few who can maintain their faith, and a source of deep sadness for those who lose it. For if even a higher power has left you in prison, what is left? It is a struggle for the soul in the darkness, a struggle that is often lost as the body and mind slowly weaken. The silence of the dungeon is broken only by the echoes of your own thoughts and prayers, a dialogue that often becomes a monologue in this difficult place. And in the end, the question of whether you will really survive in the dungeon is not just a question of the body, but also of the spirit. If you thought being a medieval farmer was tough, consider being a woman in a dungeon. All the dirt, hunger and fear, plus difficult treatment, expected obedience, and little social standing. In the Middle Ages, a woman's life in the dungeon is like a difficult situation with limited help and no easy way out. From birth, a girl's life path is largely set. Marry young, have children, serve your husband, likely die tired. Education? Hardly any. Unless you're from a rich family and go to a religious place. Your learning stops about the moment you learn basic household skills. But in the dungeon, even these simple skills are not important. You're just a body that is slowly getting weaker. Marriage happens early. It's not strange to be promised at 12 and pregnant at 14. It's not about feelings. It's about land, animals, and family connections. Your opinion is not needed. In the dungeon, you're cut off from all of this. If you are a woman, your marriage, if you had one, is probably not considered important. You're now seen as belonging to those holding you or responsible for your imprisonment. Your job is to survive, if you can, and not complain. Because complaining could be seen negatively or worse, linked to witchcraft. This label could lead to death, depending on local practices. Births were risky. There is no special care before birth, no clean tools, no pain relief. Midwives do their best, but even minor issues can mean death for the mother, the child, or both. Some women survive many pregnancies, many don't survive two. But in the dungeon, even birth is a very difficult possibility. If a woman is put in a dungeon while pregnant, the chances of survival for her and her child are very low. There is no midwife, no help, just the cold stone floor and the darkness. But don't worry, once the baby is out, your work will increase. Even in the dungeon. Now you have a child making noise in a place with insects, or cell, and you have to feed the child, prepare food, if there's food, clean, if there's water, and still help in the fields, if you're not already in the dungeon. You don't get a break. You're expected to serve others. If you're unmarried, you're looked upon with doubt. When you are widowed, you are vulnerable. If you're loud, you're seen as difficult. Women who didn't fit in were often accused of witchcraft, especially if they knew about plants, had a strong way of being, or simply looked at someone in a way that was not liked. Even in church, your role is limited. Women in religious orders lived under strict rules. No speaking without permission, limited freedom to move, and your spiritual value is often ranked below men. In short, if you are a woman in the Middle Ages, you're expected to endure, obey, have children, and suffer quietly, ideally without showing distress. Because even in a time of widespread difficult conditions, women were somehow expected to suffer in a way that was not seen as troublesome. In the dungeon, this expectation to suffer quietly is even stronger, but it is a quietness that no one sees and a suffering that no one shares. The only power you have is the ability to choose your own end, or the hope of a quick end. So far you've dealt with dirt, hunger, social issues, and possibly difficult animals. But just when you think your day can't get more difficult, violence comes. It can be loud, painful, and often acceptable by medieval standards. Let's be clear, the Middle Ages were not a time of peace. The idea of order usually meant, hopefully the local leader is not in a bad mood. Violence is common, in the house, on the streets, in conflicts, in church disagreements, and sometimes when getting food. Crime is common, punishment is harsh, and justice is more about public display than protection. Take a piece of bread and you could lose a hand. Accused of not telling the truth, your tongue could be marked. Talking too much. Use a device, a metal mask, that is attached to the head with a piece in the mouth for control. Let's say you're accused of a serious crime, not following teachings, theft, witchcraft. How do you prove you didn't do it? Through a test, often involving pain. Welcome to a test by a higher power. One version. You put your hand in hot water to get a stone out. If it heals in 3 days without infection, you're seen as innocent. If not, you are seen as guilty. Another option, you will be thrown into a river. If you sink, you are innocent and likely die. If you float, you are seen as guilty and will still be punished. It's like a medieval test where the result is survival, and the person in charge is not on your side. And if you are sentenced to death, it is a public event. Executions are done in front of people watching, by hanging, cutting off the head, burning. Sometimes people bring food. It's the medieval equivalent of public viewing. Domestic violence is very common. Husbands were allowed, even expected, to control their wives and children. Street fights happen often. You could be hit just for looking at a rich person's animal the wrong way. And conflict is always possible. Local disagreements, land issues, religious campaigns. Someone is always going to fight someone else for reasons like honor, belief, or lack of other things to do. Violence in the Middle Ages is not a breakdown of society, it is part of society. Everyone lives with the constant understanding that life is uncertain, justice is not always fair, and your neighbour might cause you physical harm because of a small issue. So move carefully, look down, and don't trust anyone with a weapon. All this is the reality of the world outside. But in the dungeon, this violence becomes even more focused and constant. There are no rules here, no hope of a public statement or a decision that might be fair. The violence comes from the guards, from your cellmates, from the place itself. Torture is not only a way to get information, but often also a form of punishment, to cause fear, or simply to entertain the guards. You're subjected to physical harm, mental difficulty through being alone and being treated without respect. Every day is a test of how much pain you can handle before you give up. The sounds of the dungeon are the sounds of violence, the noise of tools used for harm, the sounds of other prisoners, the crack of whips, the noise of chains as someone tries to protect themselves. You see the marks of violence on the bodies of your cellmates, the wounds, the damaged body parts, the signs of mental distress in their eyes. You know that the same situation can happen to you at any time. There is no safe place in the dungeon, no corner where you are safe from violence. It is a presence that is always there, that stays with you from the moment you're put into this place until your last breath. And even if you survive the physical violence, the constant fear of it weakens your spirit. It is a place where humanity is slowly removed until nothing is left but a weakened body waiting for the end. At this point you have survived the dirt, the insects, the lack of cleanliness, and the possibility of public bad treatment. But now comes the final part of most medieval lives, an early and simple death. If you've survived past 40 and are still breathing, you're seen as very old. You may even be referred to as the Old One, which is less a name than a rare event. Let's put it simply. The average time people lived is around 30 to 40 years, but this number is greatly affected by children not surviving. Almost half of all children died before the age of 5. Illness, not enough food, or a cold winter were enough. No modern medical help, no hope. If you have survived childhood, you will already be tired as an adult. Work began as soon as you could walk well, and by the time you were 25 your joints were making noise like an old door. You were perhaps missing some teeth, a finger, and most of your early positive feelings. Women faced a particularly deadly event, giving birth. It was one of the main causes of death for medieval women. No pain relief, no medical intervention, just prayer, hot water, and someone to hold your hand as you lost blood on a bed with straw. For men, the dangers were different but just as constant. Accidents while working the land, infections from small wounds, an argument with a neighbour, a military action that went wrong. Even going to the market could be risky if you met someone who intended harm or a tax collector who was angry. Death could also come quietly from widespread illness that made many people die quickly, or from periods without food that could last entire seasons and affect whole villages, or bad luck like eating food that had gone bad and spending your final hours having strange thoughts and making sounds at the walls. And funerals, you were lucky if you got one. Bodies were often buried quickly to avoid illness spreading. No special preparation, no nice boxes, just a hole, a few words said quickly, and a small pile of earth if there was space near the church. So yes, in medieval times life was difficult, short, and constantly at risk from death in various common forms. You didn't stop working due to age, you just stopped being alive. And speaking of leaving, let's move on to your final time in the dungeon. In prison, the average time people live is not even 30 to 40 years. It lasts weeks, perhaps months, if you're very strong, or those holding you want to keep you alive. You're not considered old when you reach 40. You're a rare event. In the dungeon, death is always close. A quiet cellmate who is just waiting for your strength to lessen. The main causes of death in dungeons are not fighting or criminals, but the difficult conditions: hunger, thirst, cold, illness, and infections. A simple scratch that becomes infected can lead to your end in a matter of days. The wounds from harm that are not treated, the illnesses caused by the bad food and water, all contribute to your body giving up quickly. The lack of light leads to a lack of important nutrients and thus weak bones. The constant wetness causes problems with joints and lungs. The general weakness caused by not enough food makes you open to every illness that can be in this place. And if you don't die from physical suffering, then there is still mental distress. Being alone, the lack of sensory input, the constant fear and sadness can affect your mind and send you into a state of confusion or not reacting from which there is no escape. Many prisoners die because their spirit is broken, not their body. Death in prison is rarely seen as grand or noteworthy. It is dirty, lonely, and often not noticed. You will lie in your own waste with small animals around as your last breath goes into the damp, cold air. Your body may lie there for days before a guard notices it. Then it is simply moved away, often put into a shared pit to make space for the next person. There is no service, no prayers, no being remembered. You're just another number that is no longer counted, another person affected by this difficult system. So yes, life in the dungeon was difficult, very short, and constantly at risk from death in its most difficult forms. You didn't stop working due to age, you just stopped being alive. The medieval dungeon is not a place to just get by. It is a place where one dies slowly and with pain, or suddenly and unexpectedly, but always without respect and without hope. Every day you spend there is going deeper into a harder place, and the end is always the same, only the way you get there is different. And since we're talking about leaving, let's move on to your final part. The medieval idea is fading. So, how was your day? You woke up in dirt, relieved yourself in a bucket or on the floor, thought about cleaning your teeth, almost felt weak from hunger, felt discomfort in your body, had itchy clothes, hoped not to get sick, and avoided a public punishment for having a small animal. Welcome to a single day in medieval Europe. Do you still think about becoming a knight? Think again. This idea of the Middle Ages, brave fighters, noble women in high places, great battles and meals in lit rooms, is a story made better by tales and books. In truth, the medieval world was dirty, harsh, and not fair. Social rank was very important. If you were born poor, you stayed poor. If you were born rich, congratulations, you had a better chance of living. But you were still one bad meal away from illness and a quick end. Even the nobles were not safe from difficult conditions. Castles were cold stone places full of insects, smoke, and marriages for political reasons. Sure, you had warmer clothes and something to drink, but you also had a chance of death in a small fight or from a small injury that became infected. Not exactly easy living. The past times were not easy. These are constant difficulties. Everything took longer. Everything caused more discomfort. Everything from birth to eating had effects. Life was about survival, not free time. And when you found a quiet moment to think, to dream, to imagine something better, you couldn't do much with it. No chance for improvement, no modern medical help, no way to find information about problems. You lived, suffered, worked, and died close to where you were born. But here's a notable part. Through it all, people still found ways to make noise, sing songs, tell stories, find love, and find purpose. Not because life was easy, but because people are persistent. Even in the most difficult times, they found room for some positive feeling. But this idea of people finding a way to cope ends quickly as soon as you go into a medieval dungeon. The idea that humans can still keep a spark of being human under the most difficult conditions is tested here, and often does not succeed. In the dungeon there is no noise of happiness, no songs, except perhaps sounds of distress, no stories, except of difficult things, no love, except perhaps for one's own survival or end. Here the fight for being human is not only persistent, but often without result. The mental difficulty of being alone, the physical discomfort of harm and hunger, the constant possibility of illness and death, all weaken the spirit so much that a person often becomes empty. The marks left by a medieval dungeon are not only physical, but also deeply affecting the spirit. Even if you could escape, you would never be the same again. The dungeon affects the spirit, removing the memories of good things and putting in their place a sense of constant difficulty. It is a place that pushes the human ability to cope to its very edge, and then often overcomes it. And say a very special thank you for never having to experience the reality of a medieval dungeon.